Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and welcome to my tutorial on the template coding assignment. This assignment is based upon the content that's in Chapter 4 of the Pinkham book, Django Unleashed. Although the approach that we're going to take is a little more simplified, we're going to be able to do a lot more testing on our code than you can do if you follow the tutorial that's in chapter 4 of the Pinkham book. So I think it's going to make it a little bit easier, and hopefully it's going to make it a lot more fun. So let's recall where we were when we finished the last of the coding assignments. That was the model assignment. So we should have had the model created, and we should have installed the admin application such that we were able to do data entry on the database using that application. So let's just make sure that our code is in that state. So I'm going to run the manage Pi task. And I'm going to do a run server. And that looks good. And I'm going to open up my browser. And we didn't have any real page functionality, so it should look just like it looks here. And let's go and look at the admin URL. We put that in, and of course we're able to log in with our test user and SOIS secret, SOISSECRET. That's our magic password. And let's see. Okay, so we've got courses. We have them. So we've got 3 courses identified at this point. Infos 110, 340, and 780. 3 courses that I happen to teach up at UWM. Instructors, well, we've got 3, so just enough to see that they're in alphabetical order. That's good. We've got sections. So let's see, we've got 2 sections of Infos 110, one in spring 2018, one in summer 2018. And we've got 1 section of Infos 340 in spring 2018. That looks good. And as for semesters, we have spring and summer 2018. Okay. And I'm going to make a change here just while we're here. I made it in, it's going to be helpful to us. The problem that I have is when I have more years than this, they don't sort well. So what I want to do is I want to put the year first. Okay. So how do I want this to look? So instead of spring 2018, I want it to say 2018 spring, and I want to save it. And instead of summer 2018, I want it to say 2018 summer. Okay, that looks better. And now if I add something like 2017 fall, it sort of sorts into a fortuitous order. And that's what I would like to see there. Okay, and you'll remember that we added properties to the model classes in order to get, among other things, a proper ordering of the instances that we see here. And go back to course info again and students. And so we've got 3 students at this point. That's not too bad. That's at least enough to show us a list of students, and we can see that we were able to get these in alphabetical order too, and we were able to take advantage of seeing their nickname in our list. So if we simply click on each of these things, we get a list of the instances. And that's the kind of functionality that we're going to put together in this tutorial for these parts of the model. So for courses, instructors, sections, semesters, and students, we want to have a page where we can go that has a list of them. So we would call this an instructor's list, a courses list, a sections list, a semesters list, or a students list. And when we go to them, we basically would like them to look like this. Okay, now the layout of the page is going to look more like the layout of the pages in Chapter 4 of the Pinkham book, but we want a proper list that shows each of the instances that we have added to the database, and we want them to be we want the strings that are shown for each instance, so we can identify them to match the ones that we see here, because we worked on those in our last assignment, and we want the ordering to be the same. So we want them to come out in proper alphabetical order like these two. So that's going to be our goal, but we're not going to use this admin functionality because that's really for admins, right? This is a capability that you would allow an admin to go in and tweak the data in the site without really relying on the application. Yeah, kind of playing God a little bit. So certainly not a capability you'd want to give to your average user. Okay, so that's what we want. It looks like we're in pretty good shape here. So let's log out of here. Okay. And let's go back and see what we get when we just go to the domain name itself, which in this case is just an IP address and a port number. And right now we don't get much functionality. Okay. Very good. All right. So we're going to have to make some changes, and let's think about that. Now, in the Pinkham book in Chapter 4, they kind of work through some examples, and we saw when we were going through there that they put together a couple of examples in Chapter 4 where we had a URL, we coded, so put some code in the urls.py, we put some code in the views.py, and those are really the two controller functions in Django. And that we were able to do that, and we were able to pull content from the model out of the database, and we were able to format it with a template. So what we're going to try to do there, we're going to try to do the same thing. Okay, so let's do the first one. Okay, so what are we going to try to do? Well, I say the first thing that we want to do is we want to create an instructor list. Okay, so let's do that. So to do that, up in our course info, we're going to need a templates directory. We don't already have one, so let's add that. So we want a new directory called templates. Okay. And under that, oddly enough, we are going to follow a standard. The template directory hierarchy in the course info app looks like this. So we've got templates, course info, and then we go to the individual templates. So it's sort of weird because the directory structure is course info, templates, course info, which you would think would be kind of odd. Okay, so let's do our first one. Okay, and our first template is going to be an HTML file. That's the format that we use. And we're going to call it Instructor list. And we don't have to add on .html. We're just going to get that automatically. And I've got this under version control, so I'm going to tell it to just keep putting things under version control here. Whenever I add something, I want to include it in the version control. And at this point, we don't want all of this skeleton of the HTML page because, one, we can get the browser to show us output without it. Browsers are really pretty lenient about what you send them. So we're just going to send them a code fragment, okay? And then the other reason is that we're eventually going to have a parent page that this is going to be a child of, and the parent page is going to have all the boilerplate HTML text. So we're not going to have it in this individual document. So in the meantime, we'll get away with a fragment. Okay? So our fragment is going to kind of look like this. We want to have an H2 that says that this is an instructor list, right? And underneath it, we want to have an unordered list, okay? And we're going to want to iterate over a list of instructors that we're going to be passed from the view. Okay, so what does that look like? Well, it's one of these template tags with a curly brace %, and we're going to say for instructor in instructor list. And in the short run, these are going to seem kind of magical, but before long, we're going to figure out that they're not magical at all. Okay, and every time we have one of these code blocks, we begin with a for or an if or something like that. We need to end it explicitly. So we're going to use the curly brace % again, and we're going to have an end for. Okay, pretty good. And I guess I could make this code a little bigger so you could see it. All right, so sorry I didn't do that earlier. Okay, so within the UL, what do we want to have? Well, we want to have an LI, a list item. That looks good. Okay, and this is an instructor list. Okay, that's fine. So each of these is going to be listing an instructor. Okay, and it's also going to be a link. Okay, so these instructor list page is going to be a list of names, but each name is going to be a link. It's going to be an anchor tag, and when we click on it, we're going to go to the detail page for that instructor. Okay, pretty typically the same thing, the same architecture that Pinkham was doing in his chapter 4. So we want to have a we're going to have an A element, and we're going to have an href. And just like we took the approach we took in Pinkham chapter 4, we're going to leave that empty for now. And we're going to leave that empty because even though we could conjure up an expression that we would like to have here, there are a lot of helpers in Django that make it easy for us to get a string that will help us to form the URL. But we're not going to really know about that shortcut till we get down to the chapter on URLs. So instead of phoning this up, we're just going to leave it blank, which means when we click on the link, it's just not going to go anywhere. And then we'll come back when we get to the URLs chapter, and we'll make good on our promise to have a link to the detail page. The other thing that we're doing is, because we don't have links to detail pages, we're not going to have a way to get to detail pages. So we're not coding the detail pages like they did in chapter 4 of the Pinkham book. I really frown on creating code that you can't test pretty quickly. Untested code is kind of an ugly thing. And so we're going to create all the lists. We're going to create the templates and hook up all the lists, and we're going to test them, and we're going to stop at that. We're not going to create the detail pages at this point because we're not in a position to test them. And as I say, code that you can't test is not very valuable. Okay, so what are we going to put in here? Well, we want the name of the instructor. So if we look at this comprehension expression up here, because that's what this is, we can see that each time we go through, we can use the variable name instructor in order to get at the instance that we're on. And so we can use one of these template tags, the double curly brace, and we need some expression to put in here. And in the Pinkham book, you would do something like this: instructor dot last name. Okay, so you would ask for one of the fields of the instructor object. The problem is for us that we don't want to reconstruct the string representation of an instructor instance. We did that last week. Okay, so we came up with a string function for the instructor model class, such that we got the last name comma first name. So how do we call the string function? Well, we just use the name. We just use the variable name that holds a reference to the object itself. Okay, and so the convention is, if we just point to the object in a context where things get turned into a string, it'll call the string method implicitly for us. So that's a trick that we're going to use right here. Okay, so we could stop here, except that we're going to go ahead and use the rest of the recommended design from chapter 4, and we're going to have an empty tag here. Okay, and then we're going to have some code down here for when it's empty, and again we're going to have a list item, and we're going to put it inside an emphasis tag, and inside we're going to say there are currently no instructors available. Now, this is a pretty good design. What's going to happen is that when we don't have any instructors, we're going to get one bullet point with this sentence, and it's going to be kind of distinctive because we put it in an EM element. Okay, but it's really not a super design because when you see a bullet, you think you have an instance. So I if it's good enough for Pinkham, it's good enough for me. Okay, so we've got that whole thing there. Okay, so this is a pretty good starter template for us. We're going to make improvements in it in a couple of minutes. Okay, but then how do we use the template? Well, here's how things go. We kind of tested it in chapter 4 when we did Hello World and all that kind of stuff. But the workflow always begins in URLs. And the URLs that's active right now is the URLs that's in Easy University tutorial. And right now we only check for one thing, admin. So there's an import up here. Okay, and I'm going to get rid of all these extra comments. And so what kind of pattern are we going to get? What are we going to type after the domain name if we want to have an instructor list? And it turns out that what people usually do, and this is going to become pretty close to what we do in the end, is I'm just going to copy this. Okay, and I'm going to say if we get a string that begins with, instead of begins and ends with admin / I'm going to say we want it to be instructor /. Okay, so we say the two things that we're looking for now is one is we can get admin, the other one is that we can get instructor. Okay, and then what's going to happen here? We're certainly not going to go to the admin site URL. So what are we going to do? Well, instead of that, we're going to give the name of a view. Okay, and the view is just going to be called instructor list view. Okay, just say, oh, well, where's that? Well, we're going to have to import it. Okay, so we're going to say from course info import from course info views import instructor list view. Okay, and that would be really nice if we really had an instructor list view. Okay, well, we're going to need that, right? So as soon as we go to the views.py in the course info directory, and we add an instructor list view, this is going to go away. Okay, so course info views. Let's look at what we have. Well, we don't have any views yet. Okay, well, it's time to get some, right? So what are they going to look like? Well, where do we get this code? Well, we're going to get this code primarily from the code that's in chapter 4 of the Pinkham book. Okay, so I'm just going to go to that code, and we're going to Going to find our Django Unleashed here. Okay. And we're going to find our way to views right here. And that was not what we wanted. Sorry. I double clicked on it. I need to open it with an editor. And this is the code that I tested. I'm just going to show you this. This is the code that I tested when I did the briefing for that view, for that chapter. Okay, this is how we got the tag list to display. Okay, so let's see, we have a couple of imports. Okay, and then we have the first kind of view we learn how to do is a procedure view. Okay, so we have a procedure that has the name that we're looking for. In his case, he was looking for homepage. We're going to be looking for instructor list. So let's just take this code as it currently exists and copy it, and we're just going to borrow it and clean it up for our own purposes. Very good. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of things up here. Sorry, let me get that out of here. Okay. So from models, import a tag. Well, it's not tag anymore. It's going to be instructor. So import instructor. Okay, and we're going to say we're going to declare a procedure, but instead of calling it homepage, let's just call this instructor list view. Okay, that's nice. If you go back to the URLs, what happened to our instructor list view? Well, it's not working just yet. It should be, though. Well, we're not quite. Oh, I can't spell. Instructor. My apologies. Instructor list view. And now we go to URLs. And that went away. So that's all working. Okay, so what's going to happen again is we're going to type a URL in the browser. Control's going to come to the URLs module. It's going to look through and see if it has a match. In our case, and what we're testing now, we're going to want to match on instructor slash. It'll be slash instructor slash. And when that's true, then we want to transfer control to the instructor list view. And the instructor list view will be a lot like the code that we got from chapter 4, but we're going to change a couple things around. We're not going to be dealing with tags. So instead of tag list, we're going to have instructor list. Okay? And instead of saying tag objects all, we're going to say instructor objects all. So this is going to get us a query set that's going to have all the instructors in it. Okay. Now we have to use the loader to get our template. Well, these are the names from the Pinkham book. So our directory is called course info. Okay. And we don't have a tag list HTML. We have an instructor list HTML. Okay, so that's good. Okay, now I want to point out that this is a change right here. Okay, um, in this version of Django, when you create a context, and we'll talk about a context in a second, you don't use the context class anymore. You just use a plain old dictionary. So I'm just going to put a comment and say newer Django releases don't use the context class to create a context. Just a plain dictionary. So this is going to be different than what we did in Chapter 4, because in Chapter 4 we're using good old Django 1.8. Well, we're not using that anymore. So what's interesting here is that we have a dictionary that we have created, and in the old way we passed it to the constructor for the context class. Well, we're just not going to involve the context class. Let's just not pass it to the constructor. Very good. Okay, we don't need this paren on the end. All right, and this would look fine, except that we have to get the names to match now. So the context is going to be instructor list, and we're going to match instructor list. Okay, and then we're going to create an output string by using the template that we already loaded up and telling it to render using the context that we created. Okay, and we're going to get that back, and we're going to send that string back as our response. Okay, that looks pretty good. So again, the flow of the action is we type in the URL, we hit enter, it goes to the server. The server looks for a match in the URLs module. We're going to get a match here. Okay. Then we're going to go to a view, which is going to do most of the action control. The URL routing is action control, but it's very limited, right? And we're going to go to the instructor list view, which is in views, instructor list view. And what does this do? Well, it retrieves the data from the model. Okay. So what we've done here is we've gotten a list of the instances of instructor that are in the model, in the database, and we've put it into a variable called instructor list. We have loaded up a reference to our template. Okay, we create a context. What's a context? It's a way for us to pass data to the template. Okay, so when we're doing the rendering, we always do the rendering with a template and a context. Okay, and so what's the context here? It's just a dictionary. And what is the dictionary? Well, it says that we have this list, instructor list, and it's going to be known in the template by the name instructor list. Pretty good. And then we say we want to render it and do the output. So let's give it a run. Okay. Now we don't have to start the server again because we because we're using the development server. So as long as our code is saved, that's fine. Every once in a while, on the Mac here, I often do Command S to make sure it's been saved. On Windows, it would be a Control S. But you don't really have to do that. As long as you come off of the line that you changed, it should automatically save. So why don't we open the browser again? And again, as soon as we add a URL other than admin, then if we don't get a match, okay, like when we go to 127.0.0.1 port 8000, okay, which means that we have the domain name, but we don't have any path within it. If it doesn't match admin or instructor, we get a 404 page not found. So that's what we're going to expect to get from now on in when the page is not found. And we don't want to type admin, we want to type instructor. So /instructor/ return. And there's our instructor list. What's not looking exactly like we would like it to look, let's find out. We seem to be getting, we seem to have gotten 3 of these things here, okay, but we're not really displaying what we want to display, so we must have an error in our template. So I'm just going to shrink this, and let's go to our template. And let's just make sure that we say it the right way. So let's just copy this and make sure we're using the same name. Instructor. Okay, and again, I come off of that line, it should be saved. So let's go back. And let's say instructor. And we want to refresh it. And lo and behold, I've got an error here. So instead of you watching me debug this error, I am going to pause it. When I come back, I'm going to magically have found it. Wait for the magic. It didn't take long because this code that I wanted to have inside the A element is inside the href attribute, which I promised we were going to leave blank. So I'm going to cut that out and I'm going to paste it where it's supposed to be, and now we're going to get the behavior that we want. So I'm going to go down and bring up my browser again. Okay, and we should be able to just refresh the page. So let's refresh the page, and there we are. So what I really like here is that because we implicitly called the string method on our instructor class by just using the name of the variable that pointed to an instance of that class, we got the formatted string that gave us a properly formatted name for the people who we have. Okay, so we didn't have to redo that code. We created that code in order to make the admin functions work last week. Well, we just capitalized on it today. Okay, so let's just go over again why this works. Okay, if we're looking at the template, okay, we're going to fill in from this template tag instructor. Okay, that happens to be the name of the variable in this for in comprehension. Okay, so it knows that every time through, we're going to go through this list of instructors, and it's going to be called instructor within the loop here with this for and for. Okay, and where's the data coming from? Well, it's coming from an object that we've been passed in our context, and it's known as the name instructor list. Okay, well, let's look back at the view at the context. Okay, so we have this thing that says instructor list. The name instructor list is going to be associated with the variable that we created that holds the instructor list. Now, I want you to know that this isn't magical. Okay, so we're just going to say, let's use a bad name like Waldo. So we're going to say the name Waldo is now going to be, it's going to be associated with the list that is the instructor list. Now, if we come back here and we refresh, it's going to be broken. Okay, so let's break it. Okay. Oh, no, we can't find any instructors at all. We're going to go through that in a minute. Okay. Okay, so it couldn't find them. So let's go back to PyCharm and let's get that fixed. And how could we do it? Well, we could just go into the template and we could say, oh, we're using the name Fido. Okay, so it's that name that we used in that dictionary, that's what's got to match up. So I'm going to save that and come back, and I'm going to refresh that page. Did I say Fido? It's one of my typical ones. Apparently I didn't. Views. Waldo. You don't want to confuse your Waldo with your Fido. That's another one of my popular names, Waldo and Fido. Okay, so we've got that changed, and now we're going to refresh it. All right, so that works. So I just want to remind you that there's no magic going on. It is kind of magic, but it's very mechanical plumbing. Okay, this name, this name allows the template engine to pull a reference to the list that we want out of the context. And let's use a more friendly name again. Let's go back to instructor list, because that's a more friendly name. It just happens to match the name that we're also using here in the views. Down here, let's go back to instructor list. Okay. So we're going to get rid of all of the magic here. And again, let's do this. And it works just fine. So that's pretty good. Now, I'm going to ask you, is that fully tested? Well, it's probably fully tested now because we accidentally saw what happens when we don't have any instructors. But let's pretend we didn't accidentally get that, okay? How could we create some test code that would allow us to see what our output looks like when we don't get any instructors back, when we haven't populated it yet? Well, pretty easy to do, okay? It turns out that there's an expression that we could use, kind of like this instructor objects all, and it is instructor objects none. So we call a different method, not the all method, we call the none method, N-O-N-E, and that's going to give us back an empty list of the right type, but an empty list. So let's toggle the one that brings back all of them into a comment. Okay, So let's do this. So let's on the Mac, it's a command slash. It's a control slash on Windows. So we're going to execute the other test here. So that's going to be saved, and let's go back to the browser and refresh. And we get the empty message. There are currently no instructors available. Well, that's pretty good. Is that great design? No, it's not great design. Is it good design? It's good enough design. All right. So, good. All right. So then, how do I toggle that back? Well, here's how I do it. I put the cursor on the first one, and I press command slash, and it goes immediately to the next one, and I press command slash again, and now I've toggled them. Okay, so if you have a pair of alternative test conditions, this is not really sophisticated testing, but that's how you can toggle them on and off. So now we're going to come back here and refresh, and there's our data again. So that's pretty good, right? Now, do we have everything that we want from our template? No, we don't. Okay, so we're going to do a little bit more work on the template. First of all, we're only putting out a page fragment, right? And that's nice, but we want to put out a very polite, proper HTML page, right? And we want to pull we want to put that into a parent page. So we want to inherit from it in this template. We want to have a parent template that has the boilerplate, and we want a little more content there too. So how could we do that? Well, let's take a look at the code from again the textbook. Okay, so I'm going to find that part of the okay, there we are. So I've found my directory, and I'm going to open up a copy of now in the textbook, he does a 2-level inheritance. He has a parent page, a grandparent page, and then he has for each of the apps he has a parent page, and then he has the individual template pages. So let's take a look at his grandparent page, which is in the directory templates, and it's called base HTML. Let's open that one. And this is the one that we're going to emulate. Okay? Are we going to do exactly what they're going to do? No, but we're going to do a lot of it. Okay, so what's here? Well, first of all, we have just the skeleton of a proper HTML page, and it's a proper HTML5 page. Okay, so we have the doc type, we have the HTML, we have the head. What does he have in the head? Well, he's got a meta for the char set. He's got a title. He's pulling some content into the title from our child template. He's got a meta to deal with some of the cross browser issues. He has a meta, again, to deal with some of the cross-browser issues. He's got a little script for IE. He has this IE shiv in there. That's all pretty good stuff. This is kind of boilerplate-ish, except for what we're doing to pull the content in. Okay? And then down in the body, he has a header. Okay. And included in the header, he, in some version of this, he has navigation. We're going to have some navigation in ours. And then he pulls in the main content from our child page. And then he's got the footer. He's got a little footer here. Okay. So, am I going to copy him exactly? Well, no. I'm going to create a page that we're going to call base.html. So we're going to say we want a new HTML file. We're going to call it base, which is what we call these parent templates. Okay. And what's this going to look like? Well, I've created the page and I've shared it with you on the weekly schedule in terms of your assignment, because I don't want this to be a big exercise in HTML coding. Okay, so let me show you everything that's in here. So I just essentially copied things from the file that's posted to the website. Okay, and of course we've got the doc type in the HTML. We've got the meta things. We're going to pull the title in from our from a block of text in our child template. Okay, this is just really a comment. Okay, the blocks in our child template, there are more than one. There's one called title and there's one called content. So when we include the block with this template tag here, well, then we have to name it. And then, of course, we have to have an end block. And this code in between is just going to be a comment. It's going to be replaced by the actual code. Okay, and then we're going to come down to the content, and within the body we're going to just have a div that we call the container. People have been doing this in layout for some time, and within the container div we have the header. Okay, and we're going to say easy university course information system, and then we have the nav. Okay, there's a special nav element in HTML5, and what we're going to have is we're going to have a link for all of our list pages: instructors, sections, courses, semesters, students. Now, could we hook these up? Could we actually put values into href? Yeah, it would be really easy to do because we just saw essentially the URL pattern that we're going to use for the student list page. It's just going to be the domain name /student I'm sorry, instructor was the one that we did, right? Student's going to work like I said. And so we could do this here. The problem is when we get the URLs, we're going to find a really easier and more maintainable way to do it. So we're going to leave these unhooked up. Okay? And then the main is where the main content is. This is another HTML5 tag. And again, this was inspired by the example in the Pinkham book. And we have a block called content. And again, there's a comment in here that says that this is the default content. And then we've got a footer. And essentially in the footer, instead of having a copyright for the material from the courseware, I have a Creative Commons licensing statement because I don't really like to copyright my courseware. I'd like to share it as long as people give me proper attribution. Okay, so that's going to be our parent page. Okay, so what are we going to have to do to our child page, instructor list, in order to make it work? Well, it's not too hard. Okay, first of all, we have to, when we come in, we have to tell it, oh, by the way, I'm not just a plain old template. I extend another template. So I want to put in a curly %, and I'm going to say extends, and then in apostrophes, course info / base HTML. Okay, so we know where that's coming from. And then let's come down here and annotate the code that we have. So this is essentially our content code. So we're going to put it into, again, a template tag, a curly %, and it's going to be a block, because it's a block of text, and has a name, content. Okay. And we're going to want to close that block. So down at the bottom, we want to do a curly % and an end block. Okay, that works pretty well. Okay, and most people would indent the code that's inside that, so I'm just going to give it one level of indentation. Okay, and the other thing that we don't have for a polite page is we don't have a title. We're pulling a title out of here in the base page, but we haven't really provided it yet. So let's provide it. So let's create another block, a curly % block title, and let's just come down here and end that block. Curly % end block. Okay, that looks good. And what's the title going to be that's going to be up on the title tab in the browser? Well, this is an instructor list. I know that Pinkham does something a little fancier than this. I think this will serve you well. Okay, so why don't we make sure this has been saved, and let's come back to our page. Let's find our instructor page. It's right here, and let's refresh it. And oh, we have a lot more content. So we have our banner up here. Okay, and we have our footer down here. Okay. And we have the instructor list we had before, and we also have this navigation stuff. And you may say, well, this all looks pretty clunky, Kevin, but of course we haven't really styled it yet. So this, within the navigation area, we can go to the instructor list, the sections list, the courses list, the semesters list, the students list. Okay. They're just not wired up yet. We're not going to wire them up until we get down and finish the chapter on the URL modules. The URLs module. Okay? All right, so that's working okay. So I've got the instructor list working the way that I'd like to do it, and now I need to do the other 4. Okay, so now I'm just going to show you one. Okay, I'm going to show you how I would go about cloning these things. And I would say that cloning is a really important skill in working with a framework. Okay, really almost all the frameworks, or I would say all the frameworks, lend themselves to cloning. So, we create one set of pages, and then we clone and clone and clone and clone. So how could we make sections work? Well, let's do it. So what do we need? Well, we're going to need a template page, sections list. We're going to have to make a change to urls.py. We're going to have to make a change to views.py. Are we going to have to make a change to the base HTML? No. So let's close that. Okay. And instead of having the instructor list open, let's go over here and copy it. So I'm going to right click on that and say I want to copy, and I want to paste into this same folder. And what do I want to call it? Well, I don't want to call it instructor list. I want to call it section list. Okay. Okay, and that's automatically open for me. So now it's just a little cloning work. Okay, so of course I don't want the title to say instructor list. I want it to say section list. Okay. I don't want the H2 to say instructor list. I want that to say section list. And then I would want the code to be a little bit more meaningful. So I want to say for each section in section list, okay, and then of course within each of the list items, I don't want to display an instructor anymore. I want to display the section object. And again, when you name the variable that holds a reference to the object in a context where it wants a string, it will implicitly call the toString, which it's more of a Java name, the string function. And so that's how we get the representation that we got. We've got one more thing to change in our message for empty. We want to say there are currently no sections available. All right, so that should serve us very well there. Now let's go up to URLs and see what we have to fix there. Okay, so let's just take instructor line and clone it. And one of the things I like about the lines here is we have a practice of always ending with a comma. So this is really pretty. So of course we're not looking for the pattern instructor. We're looking for the pattern that says section. And of course we're not going to the instructor list view. Next, we want to be directed to the section list view. Okay, and it doesn't know that name because it hasn't been imported. And when I have a section like this, so I'm going to import a lot of things. I want to have a list that starts. I want to have a multi-line list. So if you start with a paren, and then you come down here for the next one, then you can end that in a comma, and you can come down here and type in the next one, section list view. We don't need a comma there. And then I usually put the closing paren on its own line. I'd like to make it even with that. Okay. With this is going to be really easy to expand. So I've done 2 of these, and you're going to do another 3, and it's going to be really easy to extend this. Now this is lighting up because we don't really have a section list view yet. So let's go to views.py and let's clone the instructor list view. And between these procedures, okay, you want to leave 2 blank lines. So I go up and I copy the 2 blank lines on top of it and do a copy. And then I come down on the next line and I paste. So I've got the right kind of spacing. Okay. And okay, let's just do a little cloning here. All right. So we're going to come back here and we're going to say section list view. And on the next line, we're going to say section list. And now we're going to say section object. Okay, and that's good, but it's not going to like that because we haven't imported that model yet, model class. So again, I'm going to have a pretty long line here. So I'm going to put these in parens so I can do a multi-line thing. Okay. And I just want to kind of do what I did with the last one. And it really wants to put the paren out here, but I'm going to put it there just for the hell of it. And so we have instructor, and now we're going to say section. Okay, and now that's going to settle down. Now, the next line is a comment. It's part of our testing code. I'm just going to change it in its comment form. Okay. A little more dangerous because it's not going to do error checking, but if you're careful enough, it'll work. Okay. And then, of course, the template, it's in course info, but it's not instructor list, it's section list. Okay. I just like to leave this comment in here because we're just coming off a chapter 4 where we were using the context class there. Oh, by the way, if we're not using the context class, we don't need to import it. You can see it's, I don't know if you can see it, but it's light gray up here. So we don't need context up here anymore. We just need loader from that package. Okay. Okay, and then of course the 2 names down here in the context are not going to be instructor list. They're going to be section list. Okay, that should match. So I'm going to come off that line. That should save it. And let's go down to the browser. Okay. And what's interesting, let's just do a refresh here. Oh, okay. So when you go to just the main domain name, okay, which in this case is a bunch of numbers. Okay, when you go to that, okay, if we don't have a page that we've hooked up for that pattern, just the domain name, and we don't, then we should get this 404 and a list of all the URLs that we are expecting. And you can see that in addition to instructor, we're expecting section now, so that's good. And then let's just go here and type /section/, and there are the sections. right? So we've got the same outer shell of the page, and now we've got the section list. Okay, now we can click on these. They don't go anywhere because, again, we haven't hooked up the hrefs. We're not going to do that until we get to a future step. All right, then that's actually testing pretty well for me, but I also want to test what happens when I don't bring back any sections. Okay, I can do that. Let's go back to my PyCharm. Okay, and let's go to my 2 lines. I've got these 2 lines that are kind of alternative test code. Okay, so I'm going to go to the first one, and I'm going to toggle the comment on, and it goes automatically to the second. I toggle that off, and I'm going to come off that line so it saves it, and I'm going to go back to my browser. And why it thinks it can't connect to the server, I don't know, but I must have done something a little fast. And let's go back to section. And there are currently no sections available. Okay, and then let's just prove that we can undo that. So again, I'm going to toggle the first line and toggle the second and make sure that we save it. And I'm going to go back to my browser, and I should be able to just refresh the page, and there's my content again. So we came up with the kind of an overall design, and we made it work for the instructor list. Then we cloned that into the section list, and your job on the rest of your assignment is to clone the remaining 3. Okay, so when we get done, we should be able to go to the list page for each of our tables, each of the model classes. Okay, and to do that, again, you're going to need to copy the template page. You're going to need to go to urls.py, and you're going to need to add a line. Okay, and then you're going to need to go to views.py, and you're going to need to clone a view, and you're going to have to get all the names to work. And then the last thing that you want to do is you want to test both when you bring back a proper list of whatever you're getting, say it's a course or student, and you also want to test when you don't bring back any at all, because we have that empty code, and we want to make sure that's actually working. Okay, well, that should do it. Good luck on the rest of it, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.